Luciano Oliveira Lawyers. Today is Wednesday, January the 21st, 12:32 Rio de Janeiro time. We are starting one more live stream. And as usual, if you're here with us live, you have a priority to share points of interest to be discussed by me and other participants in the chat window. Let's get started. And it looks like we have ex-New Yorker. How you doing, ex-New Yorker? And his name is Patrick. Thank you for sharing, Patrick. Patrick is asking, I want to find out if applying for the Nomad visa in Brazil allows one to immediately obtain a CRNM or CNH using just the application protocol. All right, so just sharing, about those pieces of information so everybody understands the question here. The CRNM, also known as RNM card, is the card that you, as a foreign citizen, will receive down the line after applying for a longer-term residency in Brazil. Right, so just because you have, for instance, a tourist visa, you cannot simply go to Polícia Federal and ask for such card. Such card is not available for every single situation. But if you are applying for something like the digital nomad, you are actually required to register with the Polícia Federal, and as an outcome, you're going to receive this card known as RNM or CRNM down the line. The CNH that Patrick is mentioning is the Brazilian driver's license, right? And they are both important for any foreign citizen living their lives in Brazil, right? Now, a question from Patrick is about the timeline, when he gets the card, if just with the protocol, if he can go, ahead and apply for the driver license. So let's start with the CRNM card, Patrick. The CRNM card is typically received several months after you start your journey as a digital nomad. Let's say if you are starting the process in Brazil, you're going to file this application using a system called Migrante Web, which, by the way, is not designed for end users. So naturally, most people will hire someone to lodge, to file the application on their behalf. After you file this application using the system, about a month and a half later, the Brazilian government will review your application and they will either approve, deny, or ask for more evidence. Okay, very typical for them to ask for something additional. If they ask for something additional, then typically you have 30 days to provide. If you don't provide, yes, they are going to deny your application. If you provide and they accept what you're providing, they are going to approve the application. Once they approve the application, a notice will be published on the Brazilian Official Gazette, known in Portuguese as Diário Oficial da União, right? That happens about a week later or about 10 days. And only after your approval is published on this newspaper, which, by the way, is public, right? And it has your passport number. So, Americans typically, they get very confused or aggravated, like, well, are you guys publishing my information out there? Yes, it will be published in big letters, right, on the Brazilian Official Gazette. After it's published, that's when you can schedule the appointment with the Polícia Federal. And nowadays, due to the high number of foreign citizens coming to Brazil, guess what? You're going to be chasing these appointments for a while. In Santa Catarina, it's not uncommon for an appointment to be made available a couple of months or even 3 months down the line. All right, like Rio de Janeiro, much more friendly. In my opinion, Rio de Janeiro is one of the most friendly polícias federais in Brazil. I wish it was a standard for the remaining of the country, okay? And so if you schedule in Rio de Janeiro, potentially you can find an appointment for 3 weeks down the line or a month and a half down the line. Once you attend that appointment, you're going to need to take some of the documents with you, the same documents that you uploaded during your initial application. And if Polícia Federal is satisfied with your documents, with your case, with everything, they are going to take a picture, take your fingerprints. They're doing your biographic, material for the immigration process, and if everything works well, they may give you the CRNM number. So they're not going to give you the card. They're going to give you here like what we typically say protocolo, and that's what Patrick is asking, the protocolo. So the protocolo is simply a single sheet of paper that's going to replicate the same information that you're going to have on your card down the line, right? And the protocolo for all legal effects is the same thing as the card. Now, I'm going to start to answer like Patrick's second question about the CNH or the driver license, right? And there is a difference between having the same legal value and being accepted as such, right? So traditionally, nobody is going to accept your protocolo for pretty much anything, right? So in my opinion, like you're better off, Patrick, waiting until you have actually the card to go and apply for your driver license. Okay, there is a lot of disconnect whenever you're gonna go to the let's say DMV in Brazil, right? And like whenever you're gonna deal with someone over there. 9 times out of 10, they never handled a foreign citizen before, and therefore, it's going to be a convoluted process. And if you're coming just with a piece of paper, chances of this thing moving ahead is pretty low. Okay, once you have the actual card, things start to change. So even though the CRNM protocol has the same legal value as the card, in my opinion, chances are very low that you're going to be able to secure a Brazilian driver license just because you have the protocolo. All right, Patrick. Interesting question. Didi, hey, Didi, has been a while. Nice to see you over here, Patrick. All right, Patrick, feel free to, discuss what we just spoke about and suggest other topics of interest. General Principal, good to see you over here. Boa tarde, Mr. Oliveira. Hope everything is well. The same with you. Did you see the U.S. paused immigration visas for 75 countries, including Brazil? How do you think Brazil will respond? General Principal, I don't expect a harsh reaction, right? And for those of you who don't know, the United States, it's like putting on pause applications for immigrant visas, right? Like from the U.S. perspective, immigrant visas are those leading to permanent residency. So it's not everything, right? Like, Brazilians wanting to visit the United States for vacation, to spend money, they are more than welcome to continue applying, okay? But if you are applying, for instance, for an immigrant visa based on work, guess what? The United States is pausing those applications, right? So the United States is not canceling. The United States is not saying they will deny the applications. They are just pausing. And the reasoning behind is that they want to assess fraud and financial capacity for those applicants. Because according to the administration, there is a lot of public burden by those immigrants, right? Just like in the case of the Somalians in Minnesota, billions and billions and billions of dollars in fraud. So, there is a reaction from the government, right? Like maybe an overreaction, right? Like, trying to be balanced over here. So, yes, there is massive fraud. but I'm sure there are many Somalians who are not fraudsters, right? Like, so ideally, there would be a more like a reasonable reaction, trying to really assess those who are the fraudsters and leaving alone those who are not, right? But going back here to the point, the reasoning from the United States, they're saying, listen, let's stop this open door policy and make sure that whoever is coming into the country is not going to become a public burden, right? So this is a more let's say, rational reading of what's going on. Now, of course, like from the Brazilian government's perspective, particularly the current federal administration, which leans to the left, like they are going to take issue. They are going to take issue with that. And some people are afraid that maybe the Brazilian government is going to close some doors. For instance, the digital nomad, the retirement visa, which is super high end nowadays. The retirement visa, it's so good that's even better than the real estate investor visa nowadays in Brazil, right? So it could be very easy for the U.S. government, for the Brazilian government to reciprocate in a sense of making the lives of U.S. citizens more difficult. And by the way, Brazil does have a tradition, even actually a longer standing tradition than the United States in terms of discriminate among immigrants, right? That's a very codified policy in Brazil, immigration framework that, the approach is going to be specific to each nationality, right? So Brazil may offer something to this nationality and deny this something to another nationality, super common. So from the mechanics perspective, it would be very easy actually for Brazil to reciprocate and say, you know what, like for U.S. citizens, we're going to, just close those doors. Now, something that you also read in the news as we speak, general principle, is that Brazil has been suffering economically since some of the tariffs from the U.S. government came into place, right? Like, at the beginning, it was like, tariffs for pretty much everything. And eventually, the United States backed down a little bit and reduced lots of tariffs, right? Like, so nowadays, the U.S. tariffs on Brazilian products is much less than what they were at the beginning of the Trump administration. Still, the Brazilian economy is suffering because of that, right? And so imagine that if the Brazilian government retaliates, the U.S. could very easily say, you know what, if it is going to be, tit for tat, guess what, I'm going to just increase your tariffs. And this could damage the Brazilian economy even further than it is as we speak, right? So that's one of the reasons why I don't think we're going to see any type of strong reaction from the Brazilian government. And the second reason is, guess what? Whenever you have a U.S. citizen coming to live in Brazil, they are going to be spending their income in Brazil. And while this is not going to be, that meaningful from an individual perspective, when you think about thousands of dozens of thousands or actually hundreds of thousands of U.S. citizens in Brazil, that is something very meaningful to the Brazilian economy, right? So if Brazil closes that door to U.S. citizens, it's almost like Brazil, it's shooting itself on the foot, if you will. Okay, so interesting sharing, good news to be discussed over here, general principle, but I don't expect Brazil to be overreacting, right? Like maybe they're going to do something more, to say that there was some type of reaction, but not something really meaningful, if you will. That's my take, right? I could be wrong. We're going to see how it plays out soon. Didi, would it be easier to obtain my mother's birth certificate from Brazil if I go there in person or should I do it online? She was born in Santa Efigenia, Brazil, right? Or DT, like, I mean, you could do both ways, right? Nowadays, you could go in person, right? Like there are the registries. If you go to the registry, you can place a request for a birth certificate to be issued. In Brazil, different from the United States, like, I mean, anyone can access anyone's birth certificate. So there is no need for you to prove that the birth certificate is your mother's birth certificate. There is no need for you to explain why you want to access that. Like, it's open to the public. Anyone can go to the registry in Brazil and ask for someone's birth certificate. We have a system that relies on publicity, right? So those types of documents, they are open for requests. Now, if you try to do that remotely, there is an online system that you may try to use, and it does work reasonably well for most of the cases, right? Like, unless there is some exception in terms of how you search in the name, it doesn't work well for some places. Like Rio de Janeiro is hopeless when you're trying to search stuff from like remotely or even in person for the matter. The registration system, like the cartórios in Rio de Janeiro, they're just awful, right? But in São Paulo, they are pretty solid. So considering that everything is straight, you could potentially do that, remotely or in person, right? Now, again, this is like in probably 90% of the cases. There is always some nuance that could trigger a more difficult process, TD. All right, San Rafael. San Rafael, if someone obtains São Tomé and Príncipe through CBI program and moves to Brazil, when will one be eligible to apply for citizenship? Does CPLP apply to this case? San Rafael, so, I don't think this program has been around for enough time for us to, give you a prediction. But I can tell you, a little bit about the mechanics. So São Tomé and Príncipe, and for those of you who don't know, it's a country, or, it's a country, right? It's an island country where people speak Portuguese. And the Brazilian government has a special immigration route for those who speak Portuguese, and this immigration route is called CPLP. So that's what San Rafael is asking, right? The CPLP. So first thing, yes, it would apply because if Portuguese is the official language of São Tomé and Príncipe, therefore CPLP should apply. Now, regarding the timeline, typically you would secure 2 years of temporary residency under the CPLP, right? So you're going to be staying in Brazil for 2 years. After those 2 years, you would then upgrade your residency to the indefinite, right? Like, remember, Brazil doesn't actually say permanent residency. We use like a weird approach by saying it's an indefinite residency, meaning that there is no cutting or time limit, even though you need to renew the card every 9 years, okay? And then once you have this card, that's once you have the indefinite / permanent residency, only then you start to accrue time. For the citizenship, okay? And then in theory, like if you go by the Brazilian Constitution, it says like 1 year of residency, you could apply for the residency, right? For the citizenship. So in theory, you apply, you get the 2-year residency. After 2 years, you upgrade it to the permanent one. And if you go by the Constitution, in a year, you could apply. A challenge I see over here is that even though the Constitution says so, if you don't speak Portuguese, right, and you're going to attend the potential multiple interviews that you're going to have with Brazilian immigration, the police officers, they are going to take issue with the fact that you are not speaking Portuguese, right? Because if you're following a different route, speaking fluent Portuguese, right, like a functional, let's say, it doesn't need to be a really, really advanced level, but it got to be functional. And if you don't have a functional level of Portuguese, even though the Brazilian Constitution says that you should be able to secure the citizenship in just a year, I'm sure the police officers, they are not gonna approve your process. So what we know that some people are doing, right? Like, let's say they acquire the Portuguese citizenship, then they pursue the Brazilian one. They are filing, of course, like for mandado de segurança. Mandado de segurança is a Brazilian legal remedy that you can file to say, listen, this government body, they are not following the Constitution, right? So in other words, you can try to force the Brazilian government to grant the citizenship, even though, the public employees, they are not allowing you to do so, all right? So more or less, San Rafael, these are the dynamics right now. Of course, nobody can predict exactly how much time it's going to take, but I hope that by knowing the dynamics behind this journey, you have a better understanding of this route. Matt Gaines. Hey, Matt. Boa tarde. Good to see you over here. I hope you and Adrian are well. Does your firm handle the apostille for a birth certificate in the case of a retirement visa? Yes, Matt. Yes, right? Specifically for U.S. clients, because we don't have an expertise in apostille for every single country, even though for other countries we can find a service provider to assist you. In the U.S. particularly, we have virtually, providers in every single state, right? So if you just say, listen, I really want you guys to help me out with the apostille, you're going to be basically paying us a fee, and with this fee, we're going to do the legwork on your behalf. All right, Matt. Patrick is saying to Matt, apostilles are issued by the state governments in the U.S. for U.S. birth certificates, usually the Secretary of State of your state. Yes, that's exactly the case, Patrick. Very interesting. Like if you think about California, Secretary of State. If you think about New York, guess what? Department of State. So it's not always the Secretary of State, and it's going to change depending on the state. Texas is also Secretary of State. In some states, such as New York and California, you can actually get in different locations. New York, if I'm not mistaken, Albany, there is another one in New York City in the financial district, right? So those two locations in New York. For California, if I'm not mistaken, there is one in Los Angeles, and there is a second one in Sacramento. Texas, it is just in Austin. Florida, just in Tallahassee, and so on. So typically, you're going to get the service, of course, at the capital of the state. In some states, they try to make your life easier by offering multiple locations. Now, from a practical perspective, I would say 9 times out of 10, like the person is going to be using someone's service instead of doing any level of legwork, right? Like let's say if you live in California, I don't know, like in San Andreas, like you're not gonna drive, to Los Angeles to get an apostille. You're gonna basically ship your document to a service provider based in Los Angeles. They are gonna do the legwork, and then they are gonna FedEx back this document to you. All right, James Rochas, bom dia. Hi, James. Good to see you over here. When I renew the digital nomad visa, do I need to submit criminal check certificate again with apostille, or can I show the one I used earlier? James, so this is going to be on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes they may ask you for, a refresh. particularly if they can tell you've been traveling abroad. Let's say if you're from the U.S., you originally presented, a background check, and now you're renewing, and they look at your passport, they can say, listen, this guy, he spent half of the year in the U.S., right? Like, I think it would make sense for them to ask you for a fresh one. Interesting enough, most of the time they will not, right? What they will ask, actually, most of the time, it's gonna be background checks from Brazil, right? On the state level and on the federal level, right? Like, so you need to issue background checks in Brazil, one at the state level, another at the federal level, right? So this is a given, right? Like, they will always ask you for that, but if they feel so, they can also ask you for a refresh, of your background checks from abroad. Very rare though, okay? All right. All right, Matt Gaines, apologies for my question. I already have my birth certificate apostilled by the state of Missouri. Good for you, Matt. That's a good accomplishment, okay? One interesting point is that, whenever we are dealing with the birth certificate, we always highlight that in some states, they are going to issue like a short version of your birth certificate, and the short version will not have your parents' names on it, right? Which is exactly what the Brazilian immigration is looking for. So just make sure the version you have is the long form version. The long form version will always bring your parents' names on it. And if your apostilled birth certificate, and I'm not talking about Matt, I'm just sharing in general. If your birth certificate does not have your parents' names on it, guess what? It's not gonna make any good. All right, we have Aaron. Aaron is asking, should instrumento particular de promessa de compra e venda de futura unidade autônoma residencial be registered with a cartório? If so, what is required to do? Right. So let me explain Aaron's question so everybody can understand the dynamics and benefit from my answer. Okay. So what Aaron is asking over here is like when you have a purchase agreement. Specifically for an off-plan unit, right? So you're visiting São Paulo, and you're gonna see, like dozens and dozens and dozens of new developments, and those are called na planta, right? That's how we call in Portuguese, comprando imóvel na planta, and in English it is typically off-plan property, right? Like meaning that you're buying from the plan, there is no property basically, right? And I like to think. That's how I think about this when I am actually investing in those things. You're basically buying a promise right now that you're gonna get something at the end, right? Like so, always using this kind of mindset to avoid, a risky idea such as paying everything up front, right? My approach is instead of pursuing a larger discount, I want to have as risk. I want to have as little risk as possible. I'm not after bargaining. I'm not after, like a few cents in a currency exchange, right? Thing, and I'm not looking for a large discount. I still want a discount, and discounts, they are very typical in the off-plan market, but my priority, always reduce the risk. Don't pay everything up front and try to pay as little as possible during the construction stage, all right? Now, going back specifically to Aaron's question, right? Like once I have the purchase agreement, do I need to register with the cartório? Okay, so I would tell you that over 90% of people will never register the purchase agreement. When you register the purchase agreement, you are basically giving publicity for the fact that you bought the unit. So it is a concept that people will use to protect themselves in case of disputes, because you're going to say, listen, I was very diligent. In addition to signing a purchase agreement, I went to the cartório, I registered so other people could have noticed that I am the buyer, right? So most people would not do that, but some people will do that. This could be done like when you're buying a really expensive piece of property, right? Like, so we had the clients in the past who are buying a highly customized unit for, I don't know, like 15, 20 million reais in Rio de Janeiro, right? And then they are going to register basically because you want to, cover all the bases. And another example of need for registering the purchase agreement at the cartório is when you are applying for the real estate investor visa, okay? So when you are applying for the investor visa, you have two different sub-tracks. One track is that you're buying an existing property, okay? It cannot be land. It gotta be, either a house or an apartment. You can buy like an empty lot, right? And you cannot buy rural properties as well, even if there is a house in the rural property. You gotta be urban, and you must have a construction on it, okay? And when you're buying off plan, if you wanna apply, let's say you're buying off plan and you already spent the minimum amount required, you don't necessarily need to wait for the apartment to be ready. What you can do is like to register the purchase agreement, get other documents that you're going to need from the developer, including the construction license, which is kind of easy to get, and one that is a little bit more difficult, the memorial de incorporação, or memorial of incorporation, in which the whole story behind the offer plan is described in a legal form. And then once you have all of those things, then guess what? You can go ahead and apply for the real estate investor visa, even if the property is not finished yet. All right, so this is another application for recording the purchase agreement. But I would say most people, they are not going to buy. Purchase agreement, just like in the United States, is a promise, right? Purchase agreement, some people, they think, like I acquired a right in the property. A purchase agreement is always a piece of paper with a promise between two parties, okay? All right, so let's check what else we have. All right, explain no osso to viewers too. All right. Good point, Aaron. So Aaron, I can tell Aaron is in the journey of buying an off-plan property, and he's mentioning no osso, right? Osso, translates as bones, and I don't know if a good translation would be bare bones, right? So when you're buying an off-plan, there is even like this term. It was originally like slang. But guess what? It's being incorporated almost like a legal term. Like when you say bare bones, when you buy this property, like they are actually delivering this property is not like ready for you to move into. There's going to be a lot of things you're going to need to do, including, like flooring, finishing on the walls, like treatments for the ceiling, a bunch of things. Nowadays, there is a bare minimum that they are doing. So, very interesting, for the restroom and for the kitchen. Now they need to have, for instance, like a sink. They need to have like a faucet. And if I'm not mistaken, you need to have a few tiles on what they call wet areas, right? But, guess what? Like in Brazil, in our culture, people will always find a workaround. So they are going to give you the most, like low-grade materials you can possibly imagine, basically defeating the legislators' goal at the first place of giving you something minimum, with some minimum level of function. And that's not what happens. Like, the material is so crap that you're going to need to replace everything, right? So that's what Aaron means by no osso, right? Nieves Moses, for the visitor's visa, I have 180 days in Brazil. do I need to apply for extension after 90 days? Yeah, so no, you don't have 180. You have two caps, right? You have two caps, one cap, and it depends on your nationality, right? Brazil is gonna enforce caps and dynamics per nationality, right? So unless I know your nationality, I don't know what your caps are. But let's assume you are a U.S. citizen. Two caps are gonna apply. One cap is gonna be 90 days per entry, and the second cap is going to be 180 days per immigration year, not calendar. It's not calendar year. I'm not saying from January to December. I'm saying immigration year, which is different. And the two caps are going to work like this. So let's say you come to Brazil, once for 10 days, and then you leave Brazil. Next time you come, you will most probably get 90 days because you used 10 days, and those 10 days, they are going to count against the 180 days cap, not the 90 days cap, because the 90 days is per visit, okay? Now, let's assume you've been traveling to Brazil in a given immigration year for 150 days. Guess what? Next time you enter Brazil, your allowed stay is going to be just 30 days, okay? You have a cap of 90 for that specific visit, but your 180 has been used a lot. So instead of getting a stamp for 90 days on your passport, you most probably will have a 30-day stamp on your passport, right? Now, this is the dynamic. I'm going to tell you it's super common for, those folks at the border to do like wrong calculations. Sometimes they need to change the stamp. I don't know if they're lazy or if they don't know what they're doing. They're going to stamp something different, right? So very common to see people assuming something on their passport, and when they go check, through an immigration procedure, it shows something different in the system. So, very inconsistent, right? Now, going to the point of renewal, yes, even though your cap per entry is 90 days, you have an option to file for an extension, right? In Portuguese, we say prolongamento de estada, right? Like you go to a certain system, you're going to file, they're going to ask you for a bunch of documents, you're going to need to pay a fee, you're going to need to visit Polícia Federal, explain why you want to, stay longer, and most of the time get the extension, right? The extension is never guaranteed, right? Like that's a mistake we see, multiple times in a week. Like people assume, yes, like I have it 180 days, right? Like, I mean, that's not how things work in immigration. Immigration, you always have an expectation, okay? And you always need to understand that an expectation is not a right, okay? So there is no right for an extension. There is an expectation that if you file the extension and if you provided the documents, most probably than not, they will grant you the extension. All right, Yves, I hope that was helpful. Aaron, for the investor visa, is there a strategy for adding the cost of going no osso to finished unit in the value without incurring high taxes? Not really, Aaron, unless you're dealing, right? Like, I mean, it really depends on the market, right? Like for Rio de Janeiro, for instance, developers, they are not really flexible. Like they have so much demand. They also use like, similar systems like to handle the whole selling side of their operations. Like they don't typically deal with exceptions unless it is like a major unit. Like once you cross the 7-8 million reais barrier, people start to customize your journey, right? But like for 500,000, 1 million reais, they are not going to spend the time customizing anything for you, right? And now, if we're talking about Santa Catarina, right, Florianópolis, Camboriú, Porto Alegre, or other areas like this, very common for smaller developers to be willing to customize your journey. And if you're dealing with a small developer, the small developer in theory could incorporate the development or the finishing of the unit into the price. Okay, so what they could do is say, listen, we always sell, like bare bones, but for you, guess what? We're gonna sell the finished unit, and let's agree, I don't know, 100,000 reais or 200,000 reais. It depends on the size, depends on the finishing, and so on. But let's say if you are agreeing on 2,000 reais for the finishing, they could have this amount added to the amount of the property, and therefore this could help you, meet the minimum requirement for the real estate investor visa, but not uncommon. Okay, I would say, Aaron, that no matter what scenario, we're talking about a long shot. All right, Wilbert, Senhor Oliveira, como vai? Pretty well, Wilbert. Good to see you over here. If I send the money to family and friends in Brazil using Western Union, wise money transfer or bank transfer, does the receiver need to pay taxes in Brazil on the money? Wilbert, I strongly recommend, like whenever you have, like taxation questions, issues, planning, you need to consult with a tax attorney, right? Just like our live stream here is far from enough to give you any guidance on that aspect. Now, just to, share some context on that, there is in no place, right? It does not matter if it is in the US, in Brazil, in Mexico, once someone receives money, that money is going to be either a gift or is going to be income, right? So I see that happening all the time, right? Like people doing things without proper planning, without proper advisory. They send the money to a Brazilian and they hope for the best. And eventually the Brazilian revenue system is going to flag the money as income, okay? And then guess what? It's going to be too late for you to qualify that money as a gift. The gift taxes, they are much cheaper, they are much lower than the regular income taxes, right? But you didn't pay the gift tax. You can do that after they catch you, right? So at least here at the firm, there is no such a thing as money, sending money to parents, relatives, whatever. Like if you send the money, you're going to have a gift transaction, you're going to pay the gift tax, and then you're going to be well, right? So that's the feedback I have. Ronnie Dio, good to see you, Ronnie. It has been a while. Boa tarde. Whatever happened to the client's car who drove to Brazil, got a digital nomad, and end up getting married and got permanent residency? Ronnie, last time I spoke with him, he was planning to apply for the permanent residency, right? I haven't spoken with him for a while. Most of the time, our clients, they're going to interact with our team. And last time I spoke with him, that's when he was telling me, right, that he was going to have a child in Brazil and was discussing the marriage-based permanent resident. But that's a great question, Ronnie. I think he could not, right? I think your question here is what's he gonna do with the car, right? Because for those of you who don't know, in Brazil we have a blanket prohibition to importing cars to Brazil, okay, with two exceptions. One exception is that the car is brand new, and even if the car is brand new, you're gonna pay hell to bring this car to Brazil because of taxes that are gonna, with the cost of the broker, are gonna exceed 100% of the amount, plus endless aggravation to release this car, right? So that's the exception for new cars. The second exception is for collectibles. So if you're bringing a car that's 30 years, I'm not sure if it's 30 or 35, let's say 30 years or older, then you can bring this car under the collectible exception to importing cars, right? So Ronnie's question over here is, this client that Ronnie is mentioning, which, by the way, I'm not telling you, his name, so I'm not sharing confidential information. He drove his car from the United States to Brazil, And believe it or not, he entered Brazil from the south, right? Most would assume he would enter Brazil from the north. No, he drove all the way through South America, to Uruguay. And then from Uruguay, he entered Brazil from the south, right? And that's absolutely feasible, okay? If you look at the map, you probably can tell he cannot drive all the way. I'm sure, in some places in Central America, he would need to take a farrier boat, to move the car from one location to the other. But yes, this gentleman drove his car from the United States to Brazil. If I'm not mistaken, he said that, this journey from the United States to entering Brazil from the south, I think it took like 3 months, right? And of course, he was taking his time. He wasn't rushing. It wasn't a matter of course, like a cost or anything. It was more like a bucket list type of approach, and I found it wonderful, right? We don't have many cases like this of clients who brought a vehicle like from the United States, right? But Ronnie, what I think would happen is like he would take his car, maybe to Paraguay. I remember, back in the 90s. I don't know nowadays. Paraguay has changed a lot, and by the way, for the better, right? Nowadays we have many clients who are securing immigration benefits in Brazil and Paraguay as well. Paraguay has a beautiful taxation framework, very, very friendly, much more friendly than Brazil, right? So, but at least back in the 90s, Ronnie, you could basically take a car to Paraguay and sell without the crazy bureaucracy and red tape that you have in Brazil. So he's not going to be able to sell in Brazil because, again, there is no way for him to have this car legally in Brazil, and therefore you cannot sell to someone else in Brazil. But based on my memory from the 90s, I think he could take this car to Paraguay and sell at a discounted price and then bring this money and then buy a car in Brazil. But for sure, he cannot keep this car under the temporary import regime that's available for people who bring a car on a temporary basis. All right, Ronnie, such a nice question. Let's see what else we have. Can does Brazil tax VA disability income? Can Brazil will tax pretty much any and everything you can possibly imagine, all right, including VA disability. And my take on it is that this would trigger a reduced tax bracket, okay? I'm not sure if it is the one. My guess, and again, that's just a guess, for taxation planning, taxation information, you guys needed to consult with a tax attorney. But from the top of my head, if I'm not mistaken, you would face a 15% tax bracket. All right, Ken. So not that bad, right? It could be better if he wasn't taxed at all, but I guess 15% is not unreasonable. General principle, Mr. Oliveira, is there a path where someone who makes primarily passive income, rent, dividends, interest, can qualify for a digital nomad visa? General principle, based on the income, no, there is no such scenario. What we see happening often is like for clients who have an LLC, they can, or we can together, right, kind of find the right balance in terms of the activities that they do and the requirements for the digital nomad. But here, the government is not really giving you any points for having income or for having investments, right? What the government is going to be looking for is for some type of activity that you're doing remotely, right? Like, so for instance, a kind of similar type of situation, real estate investors, right? So, whatever they have in assets, whatever they have in returns from the real estate investment it's not meaningful for the digital nomad, but the fact that they are managing those properties remotely through a computer in Brazil, it may help qualify them for the digital nomad. There are strategies, right? If you just go out there and you do by yourself, it shouldn't work, most probably. But we've been kind of structuring the documents in a way that's going to be legit, like you're not, lying or pretending or, defrauding the Brazilian government, but you're still using whatever you're doing remotely as a step point for your application. All right, let's see what else we have. Okay, let me invite you, if you're here with us, if you would do me a favor and please like our live stream. That's going to be helpful, for our channel, for our business, and this is going to help other people just like you find this content. I really appreciate the likes. If you're not a subscriber yet, subscribe so you are going to receive a notice about new content we have. And we are producing a lot of new content this year. We have, we have a program of sponsoring photographers through FAO Brazil for original pictures and original drone footage. Okay, so you're going to see a lot of new material in this coming, months. And if you subscribe here, you're going to have access to that content. For those of you working with real estate, don't forget about our partner, Remax Nomad States. They are based in Rio de Janeiro in the outstanding neighborhood of Leblon, south area of Rio de Janeiro, but they actually work throughout the country. Okay, so I know they are helping some of our clients in the Northeast, in São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Florianopolis, and so on. So if you need it, take a screenshot, get in touch with them, and so far we have heard only good things about their service. All right, let's take a look if you have anything else. We have Mahog, Mr. Oliveira, I would like to schedule a consultation with you at the end of this month, but would like to email you some information about my case before the call. What email should I use, please? Mahog, that's absolutely fine, right? If you want to share, information, you can send to our generic email address, right? That's where we actually, receive information from clients, requests for quotes and so on. So I'm writing the email address over here, and you can send. My recommendation is don't send right now, right? Like wait until you are closer to scheduling the consultation. When you schedule the consultation, you can, write a summary about your needs. So maybe that field alone would be enough. Okay, if it is something that we can take a quick look during the consultation, no problem. Now, if it is, for instance, like a purchase agreement, right? So that's something we actually will do as a service, not like during the consultation. But there you go, Mahog. You can use this email address, and my recommendation is that you send, this stuff like closer to the time of the appointment, so it makes easier for our team to organize, right? And let them know I would like to have my consultation with Luciano Oliveira, right? We have, fortunately, we have other attorneys taking consultations as we speak. And if you tell them you want to have this consultation with me, like they are going to, have this consultation booked with me. All right. So letting you know that we're going to have our Sunday live stream is going to be this coming Sunday. Okay, so you can, for those of you who are busy during weekdays, On this Sunday, the 25th of January, we're going to have a live stream. Our live streams on Sundays, they happen at 3:30 p.m. Rio de Janeiro time, okay? Not at the same time we meet on Wednesdays. And the idea here is that for those of you who are too busy during weekdays, you also have, we try to have a couple of Sundays per month available for this live stream, right? So if you have any remaining points of interest to be discussed, and I know how it works, like you speak about something, you hear something, and sometimes it takes a while until those things, are processed in your brain, and then you're gonna have, guess what, new questions and new, topics of interest. So if that happens with you, don't forget to come to our, to our calendar on YouTube. You're gonna see that the session for this Sunday is already scheduled, and you just need to click on Notify Me. And this way, when we are starting the live stream, guess what? You're gonna receive a reminder to join us and participate like you are now. I want to say thank you to everyone who participated. Very interesting questions today, very interesting participations, and wishing you a blessed rest of your day.